Hi, soulful beings. Welcome to Sitting with Ourselves. This podcast space is for the deep discussions and reflections on many different aspects and areas about life and ourselves. From psychology, mental health and well-being, to philosophy, life theories and concepts, and topics related to our society and beyond our world on Earth, we'll have conscious conversations with thought-provoking perspectives. This is our place of being, healing, and staying grounded with our souls. Hey soulful beings, welcome to another episode of Sitting with Ourselves. It's another day today for you and for me, and today we're having another cozy talk session relating to life and living. Sometimes there are days when life starts to feel a bit flat, or another scenario where you've just come back from a trip that took you out of the everyday routine or mundane, and when it ends, you return to a different life experience and world. In this session, we're going to chat about how to make life feel more exciting again, how we can appreciate the mundane and ordinary life we live in, the little things and joys of being alive and human. Bringing it back to the situation where you go on a trip out of your 9-to-5 job and work life, or perhaps out of your university days when you're going to school, classes, and studying. You take a break and go on a holiday trip. Now, let's bring it to the aftermath of that eventful experience that pauses your normal life and takes you somewhere else for a period of time. You know that feeling when you've just come back from a long trip, the kind where every day felt like discovery. You woke up somewhere new, with no deadlines, no inbox, just the hum of adventure and freedom in your body. Maybe it was the warmth of foreign streets, the scent of ocean air, or the rush of meeting new people and tasting new rhythms of life. For a while, you weren't your working self, or you weren't your university self. You were simply alive, exploring, and unanchored. And then you come home. You unpack your suitcase, open your laptop, and suddenly the world feels smaller again. The rush quiets. Your dopamine, that chemical of excitement and anticipation, takes a nosedive. The contrast between who you were out there and who you are back here feels sharp, almost jarring. Work feels heavier, slower. Even your morning coffee doesn't hit the same. At that moment, after all that traveling, have you ever felt that feeling where life almost feels purposeless? You may suddenly be hit with a wave of existential crisis, or realization hits you during work or school, and you're suddenly questioning what you're even doing with your life. More so, this likely hits harder after a bigger event, like a long trip overseas where life in your daily routine is free from work or school. And you're going out to explore new places and attend events, and you're freely living without being tied down to a routine responsibility of work or school. You suddenly have this perceived free will, which in reality everyone has, but this can be clouded by the mindset that we are to work and live and have a stable job and so on. But this sudden feeling and time to use for whatever you want on vacation allows you to do anything you want. And then after all that time, 2 weeks or more of traveling, living a completely different life to back home where you were before, being in a new city or country, and after all that, experiencing whirlwinds of excitement during a holiday vacation for a significant time, suddenly it concludes and you're back to your reality, placed back where you paused it and left off. Suddenly, you're back, and perhaps you feel all the excitement and joy in your life is gone. Or at least there was the excitement and fun that was a dopamine high and for that period of time. And then you return and it crashes down. That trip where you had fun every day and lived a different life for a moment was like a dream that happened so fast. Now you're back to reality, and you come back with nostalgia and reminiscence of that time. Possibly filled with yearning and longing to go back just after you've arrived and come back home. Have you ever felt that meaninglessness afterwards? Maybe life was suddenly being questioned, and then your life's purpose and meaning of everything, because the difference in the life you were living when on break and the daily life you're currently living was so different. Does that sound familiar or relatable to anyone else? Something I searched up that goes with this feeling is also the post-holiday blues, and it kind of strikes you. Something similar to post-concert blues. How I imagine it would be, and what could explain the post-event or post-holiday blues, is that when you've just experienced a high and then the show's over, and you're back where that excitement and joy in the moment of the experience goes down and drops back to baseline. But the drop feels intense because of how high the increase was for emotion and mood through the event. That's how it would make sense for me to explain why that might happen. And then with trips, it's like a massive drop plummeting from the constant or increased high you feel when traveling or being on holiday. And when that just ends the moment you get back, the baseline drops, feels like a plummet massively to a low because of how much it had gone up when you were there. I would imagine there would be a lot of dopamine and serotonin in those experiences, where you might not have had that much in your daily life back home. And then having an increase of all that, and then a dropping when returning to the usual amount you had before the trip, I would expect that would feel like quite a significant drop to leave people feeling a bit blue afterwards. You may then feel this flat or down feeling in emotion and also about life, because it may be that your soul is craving that aliveness you felt during that event, that concert, or that holiday. When we travel, our brains transition to a state of heightened stimulation because every day brings novelty with all the sights, the new sights, languages, foods, faces, and routines. This constant stream of newness activates our brain's dopamine reward system with motivation, excitement, curiosity, and neuroscientifically speaking, dopamine surges with novelty. When we explore, our brain releases bursts of this chemical with anticipation and makes us feel alive, alert, and eager for more. Research in neuroscience has shown that even the mere expectation of something new triggers the brain's reward centers. Now, when you contrast that with your return, you can make a logical guess as to what would happen when you suddenly are put back in a familiar environment with the same streets, desk, emails, work. Your brain that was lighting up constantly by novelty is now surrounded by a life of predictability, and so the stimulation drops. However, your dopamine system doesn't just adjust instantly. This creates what psychologists call a dopamine deficit state, a biochemical drip that can feel like emotional flatness, restlessness, or mild sadness. This plummet feeling would also likely depend on how often one travels each year. If it's a longer time, let's say for several years, that someone hasn't traveled somewhere new or gone anywhere to explore or do something out of work for a significant period of time, the more likely the drop will be larger and hit harder when that someone goes on a big trip and comes back to what they were used to already. The increase would likely be much higher with a higher decrease than somebody who travels often, maybe twice a year, and are used to that break to travel as part of their yearly routine in life. Therefore, it'd be less unordinary to them and less novel in terms of going for the travel experience than someone who rarely goes for that experience. The comparison would be in their adjustments to their usual life after the trips, as well as when the highs return to baseline, when they return to their normal life routine and schedules. There's a contrast effect at play. When you go from a peak experience of freedom and expansion back to ordinary life of responsibilities, your perception amplifies the difference. It's not that home or work changed, it's your comparison lens that did. When you're in your 9-to-5 job, for example, even if we think about it without the scenario of coming back from a holiday vacation, it's possible you may not always feel that aliveness when you're in a repetitive, structured routine. And sometimes it makes people question what they're doing. Is this how the rest of my life is going to be? Is this it? But there's also the reality that many have to face where a stable job is what they need and they can't always just take a leap and quit and do something else. Everyone has different circumstances and a different life and what they are able to do. So we cannot compare our lives to others, but we can do what is best for ourselves and what we each need, want, and can do for our lives, including enhancing and improving our life quality. Even when we get this feeling, we can find ways to make life more alive for us and bring in that excitement, novelty, sense of meaning, connection, movement that we would have felt in those moments that made us feel like we were truly alive and living. When thinking about those experiences outside of our routine, work, many of us would have to meet our basic needs in this economy and society. The post-travel dip scenario is a bit more complex than just labeling it as holiday blues. Of course, just like how many human experiences are. Along with that post-travel holiday dip, this is also about our brains recalibrating after living in a different rhythm. The bigger the contrast, with the longer you were away, the more adventures, or how different that world felt, the harder the emotional landing tends to be, which makes complete sense. And as I mentioned, if it's been months, maybe years since you last stepped out of your ordinary routine to really go somewhere, that plummet can feel steeper. But the transition doesn't have to feel like freefall. There are ways we can land softly and bring some of that freedom, wonder, and vitality from our travels back into our everyday life, so that the post-trip world doesn't shrink, but instead expands. I'd like for us to be able to come back from a trip with fresh eyes into our normal world and seek such feelings and experiences in our everyday as we had naturally on a trip. And of course, I'm not forgetting that it's much easier to do in a new environment, city, or country you've never been to. But finding ways to recreate or do things that can bring that into our current lives, even if not to that extreme extent as when you were on holiday in a foreign place. Slowly and steadily, we can transition back from a dopamine high experience. Or even if it's not from an aftermath of excitement and we're just going about our life, we can bring in more joys, things to look forward to, novelty, and excitement that we feel may be lacking in our lives and leaves us feeling low. From the post-holiday scenario perspective, here's some ways we can gently transition back and keep a small spark alive. First, we need to allow our nervous system to recalibrate. So it helps if you can give yourself a few buffer days between arriving home and diving back into full work mode or student mode. Give yourself at least a few days to let your mind and body reorient and take the return transition slowly, unpacking slowly, resting your body, cooking comforting meals, watching a comfort content or movies or shows, maybe listening to a podcast, and then gently reconnecting with your local rhythms. Now this is where we can begin diving into how we can bring the novelty home and keep that spark alive. Even if it's not to the extent of what a trip overseas can do, we can continue to make our life feel more exciting again afterwards and see life through a different lens that's more positive than negative. I had listened to a podcast episode called How to Make Your Life Exciting Again by Mel Robbins and absolutely loved it. I really needed that during a time I was questioning the purpose of life and had felt low after a significant holiday trip of traveling myself. Just living a completely different life and then coming back to my full-time work-life balance routine. So here's a quote from Mel Robbins to make you think for a moment. Maybe life isn't boring. Maybe you've gotten boring. As in we've gotten too used to our routine and that can make life feel boring or meaningless when it becomes a cycle of routine and repeat all over again. I really recommend listening to Mel Robbins' podcast episode on this. I'll link it in the references below for you to check out. Life is full of opportunities to make it more exciting, and we've just got to find it and take action. We can spice up our life by doing little things that change and divert from what we're used to. That can be things like taking a different route to work or stopping by a new cafe after work rather than rushing for the usual home commute. Even those things are something new from the normal repetitive routine and add novelty to our day. When that adds up, these little novelty-focused habits that intentionally allow us to break out of routine and do new things in the day, that adds up to weeks and months, and then suddenly you've realized you've had all these small little experiences within your year where you did something different and you made new memories. And suddenly life feels more eventful and interesting, and you'll look back realizing how much you did in the year for yourself. And you may even feel like the time you spent was quality spent, well lived, which is amazing. Those intentional choices and habits to take a different action to what you do by routinely habit may change things for you in your life, and maybe it'll start to feel more interesting as you live it. Little by little, bit by bit, gradually, and eventually you'll start to realize it too. Let's think about how we can re-enchant our life, romanticize it, and rekindle that excitement to bring more positive experiences into our everyday. Here are just some ways that you can do this. One way is through the novelty element. Now, this is like such an important one. Having new experiences increases dopamine, which links to improved mood, motivation, and learning. It also stimulates neuroplasticity, which helps our brain literally build and grow new connections. We can bring novelty into our life by doing something out of our usual routine, like the examples I previously explained. Some more examples other than visiting a new cafe or taking a different journey route could be exploring a new hobby. You could do a challenge where you try a new hobby and set this up with a time period that suits you. Or even just trying something new each week, whether that's big or small. It doesn't have to be a hobby. Could be as little as trying a new drink or food off a menu, or as big as going on a camping trip for the weekend. Another thing we can do is change our environment. Even rearranging your room can spark new energy and bring in that sense of novelty to your living space. Next is about revisiting our flow activities. This touches on flow theory. Have you by any chance heard of being in a flow state? Being in the flow state is when we become deeply immersed in an activity or task we are doing or focusing on. And that encompasses intense focus, loss of self-consciousness, and losing sense of time. This has been explained as an optimal experience that happens when the perceived challenge of a task aligns with one's perceived skill. This immersion can come from challenging yet enjoyable tasks, enhancing engagement and feelings of contentment or satisfaction. With this in mind, we can actively reconnect with activities that absorb us where we lose track of time. This could be music, writing, hiking, building, or creating things. It could be any task that leaves you feeling stuck into it and when you are being challenged in the skills you apply. If it's too easy, boredom may occur, and if it's too hard, one may feel less motivated or anxious. The challenge has to be just right to match your skill set and ability level to handle it. Not too easy or hard, just right where it's stretching you, but not over or underwhelming. Another important thing we can do is connect with others, more deeply and meaningfully. Meaningful social connections release oxytocin and dopamine, boosting mood and motivation and reducing stress responses. Isolation or not socializing enough for the individual's level of need conversely dampens these systems. Connection here is also being with new people or someone who can energize and spark something in you, inspire you, or motivate you. We can plan shared experiences with loved ones, whether that be a lunch or dinner catch-up, physical activities, going to an event together, or making a committed schedule with someone. We can also practice micro-connection as part of this, such as smiling at strangers, interacting with your neighbors, complimenting your local barista, talking to new people, or going to meetup events. All of this contribute to enhancing relationships in your life and the social aspect of it. And having hangout plans with friends is also just another thing to look forward to outside of your usual routine. Studies have shown that quality relationships were the strong predictors of happiness and vitality. Clearly, people in your life make a difference. Share your experiences with others, not just through the digital or online, but through stories, meals, laughter, conversations. Social sharing activates oxytocin and can soften emotional dips. Remember, connection exists both overseas and at home. Connection is always there, and it starts with reaching out and socially reconnecting. Bringing that spark back means pursuing meaning in your life, not just pleasure. This is where we can bring in what we call eudaimonic well-being, a state of flourishing through living a life of meaning, purpose, and personal growth. This concept is one from positive psychology where we focus on enhancement and flourishing of life experience and on our quality of life. It emphasizes virtues, authenticity, and self-fulfillment, which can be achieved through activities aligning with our values. Eudaimonic happiness, meaning, purpose, growth, sustains well-being more than hedonic pleasures of immediate gratification. We can engage in eudaimonic happiness and well-being through activities such as developing or learning a new skill, volunteering, maintaining strong relationships, mentoring, creating something for others, helping others in some way. There are many things you can do that will align with your personal core values and self. You can contribute to something bigger than yourself in what you do here. A 2010 study found that meaning-based activities produce longer-lasting satisfaction. Now ask yourself, what makes you feel most alive? What makes you feel useful? What makes you feel aligned with who you want to be? When you ask yourself those questions, think for a moment and pay attention to what comes up for you. What you want to engage in. Are you engaging with the things that make you feel alive and happy? If you think about this question too, this also leads to more ways we can make our lives feel good again and feel more meaningful and purposeful for us. We can find meaning in doing value-aligned acts for ourselves. Maybe this is where you can start to begin trying out some of those activities. Adding to the novelty aspect, but taking a movement focus, another thing we can do is engage the body. We know that movement is linked to feel-good chemicals. Movement increases endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, all linked to vitality, our energy, liveliness, being strong and active. We can try a new physical activities such as dancing, hiking, martial arts, or yoga. We know exercise has been shown to improve mood and energy, so engage your senses and move your body in new fun ways through new activities you may have never done or wanted to try for some time. You can even add novelty in the way you do common routine or normal activities, such as walking, but instead you could walk barefoot on the grass, immersing in nature. Add some fun or novel actions into your regular exercises. Maybe you could play some games during your hike with a friend. Maybe like you're going on a walk and then you decide you want to go play hopscotch, just randomly. Be more intentional with your curiosity. This is another one. Be more aware of it and practice the curiosity. There's something in the art of noticing or exploring. Curiosity activates the brain's reward system and enhances learning and motivation. You could learn something outside of your field or career. It could be a new language, instrument, or philosophy. Instead of, what should I do today? You can ask yourself, what can I discover today? And that also reframes the question in a way that focuses on what you could find out there, the possibilities and opportunities, the surprises and what could happen, and the excitement in not knowing what wonderful things could come about for you that day. What new thing you could discover that day might enchant you? This question is a good one to ask yourself, focusing on curiosity and allowing that to occur through your actions and mindset in thinking about life in that way. This brings us to cultivating anticipation and having things to look forward to. The same as if it were a holiday trip you were excited about, there can be other things in your ordinary life that you can still look forward to, even if you aren't traveling around outside of your home country. Anticipation activates dopamine before a rewarding experience, increasing overall enjoyment. We can bring this in by planning small things to look forward to down the line on our calendars, such as a road trip, concert, date night, day out with your friends, creative project, or local event. You could create a joy calendar as one idea and mark the days with little upcoming treats, both big and small. Plan these adventures to be excited about. Even if it's a weekend getaway, that anticipation itself triggers dopamine and creates a bridge between what was and what's next. The anticipatory events can bring that light of excitement into our upcoming days of the present. Let's also bring in some play into adulthood. Do something just for fun without any outcome. Games, art, silliness, being spontaneous. Play and have fun just for the sake of it. Reconnect with childlike joys. More music, color, dance, laughter, movement. This is a topic we can touch on in another episode for sure. Repetition dulls emotional response and leaves us in habituation, where we become accustomed and used to something. This is where we can gently shift our routine through experimenting so that we can change patterns to restore novelty and emotional engagement. This makes me think of the book called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, which touches on this topic, relating to what I've been chatting about with you. And Michael proposes ways for how we can live a more meaningful and engaged life and embrace discomfort to get outside of our comfortable ways. This is a book on my to-read list, but I found it in the moments of post-travels and questioning life's purpose, so I thought I'd share. With this, we can take action to try and change our daily rhythm. If your role allows you to work from home or remotely, perhaps you could work in a park or the cafe down the street. Doing work in a new environment changes the routine's usual course or familiarity we're so used to. Not usually a morning person, you could try go on a morning walk or wake up earlier than usual to do something before the start of your work or school day. Usually listening to music on a commute, maybe you could try unplug and listen to the ambience and the sounds of the real world for a ride or two instead. Or you could switch the music for a podcast or a book if you don't usually use your commute time for that. Another thing to break the repetition is planning micro-adventures, something slightly out of your norm each week. This is a concept coined by Alastair Humphreys, whereby it's a localized adventure that's close to home, cheap, simple, short, yet still magical. Speaking of magical, this brings us to another reflection of what we can seek out in our daily lives, awe and gratitude. Awe in which we can seek out moments that make us say or think, wow. Moments or scenes that leave us feeling amazed and remind us that the world and universe is just so big, so massive, and we're just little humans living on a floating rock in the grand scheme of things. For example, stargazing and nature views can allow us to feel awe. Experiencing awe through nature, music, art, or reflection expands our time perception, increases life satisfaction, and reduces self-centered rumination or overthinking. We can try watching sunsets, stargazing, visiting museums and art galleries, or listen to moving music that could be orchestra, for example. Awe has been described as a self-transcendent emotion that renews our sense of purpose. We can go ahead with an action and write down one thing that moved you deeply each day in relation to this, or we can write down one thing we are grateful for today. Watch as this regular action we choose to do makes a difference in our life. And the thing is, we may not even realize it, but over time, we'll start to notice the effects in the long run. Let's link some of this into the topic of relating to post-travels and returning to your everyday. When easing back into your ordinary life, we can do some reflection and integrate some travel lessons into our current reality of life from what we've come back from experiencing. What did you love most about being away? Was it the freedom, connection, creativity, slowness? Then ask how you can bring one of those elements into your routine here. Maybe it's scheduling no-plan weekends, spending more time outdoors, or setting work boundaries that honor your sense of balance. We can also learn to reframe the routine. Instead of seeing our return as the end of something, we can try viewing it as an integration phase of our life journey. This re-entry adaptation or readjustment to home after being abroad is about transforming our travel experiences into internal growth. Write about what changed in you. Capture insights, moments, or shifts in values before they fade. This can help our brains encode the experience as meaning rather than loss. You can record this in any way, whether that be through a video log for yourself or writing it down in a journal. Coming home after a trip isn't just about returning, it's about reintegrating. The goal isn't to chase the high of travel endlessly, but to let what you found out there expand what's possible here in your daily life. If travel is a spark, then integration is the glowing flame that keeps burning along after. And the world doesn't stop being exciting when you unpack your suitcase from a trip. You just have to keep discovering it one ordinary moment at a time. Through all of these ways on how we can readapt to our normal lives after traveling for a significant period of time, to the general sense of just bringing that excitement back into your life when it feels like you've lost it, or life feels like it's lost its meaning in repetitiveness, or it becomes stagnant, we can live each day creating more meaning in our lives. These were just some of the key elements for what we could start doing and incorporate into our days. This is how we can make our lives more exciting again and create more joy in the ordinary life we are living right now. Let's do this together. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really hope you can make your life even more exciting and find more joys in the mundane routine. It's the art of noticing and the action of incorporating some of these ideas for bringing back that excitement. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts and feelings in the comments about this conversation we just had. Feel free to share them in the comments. This is a safe space to express yourself, and I also just love hearing other people's perspectives. Sending much love and hope to see you again next time. Bye!